Hey there, welcome to episode 171 of Mike's Collection. I'm Mike, and the part of my collection that I'm going to be talking about today is my 2013 G.I. Joe Convention box set. Now, I'm doing this video kind of by request. I kind of intended to review all these box sets a long time ago, and I did review 3 or 4 of them back in like my first couple of months of going on YouTube, like 3 years ago. But then I just kind of fell off from doing them, and I started focusing on reviewing all the new toys that I was getting coming in every week. And some of these early ideas for videos that I had, I just kind of, they got away from me. So I have a couple more of these convention box sets, and people seem to want to see them. Every now and again I get messages from people saying, like, when are you going to review the other box sets? And so, yeah, that's what I'm sitting down to do today. So, previously I've reviewed, I think it was the 2012, 2014, 2016, and 2017 sets. So just to give you a little bit of background on this, back in the early 2000s, there was a company called Fun Publications, and they owned the G.I. Joe Collectors Club and the Transformers Collectors Club, and I don't know, possibly other collectors clubs. And they basically ran fan conventions for these properties. So there was a Joe Con every year and a Transformers Con. I think they just called it TF Con. I don't know. But anyway, these were always held, and they moved them to a different city every year within the United States. And they would usually have some exclusive figures available at the show. So sometimes there were just like single figures, like available on a card or in a baggie. Sometimes there was exclusive vehicles. But at the G.I. Joe Cons, there was always this exclusive box set of like 15 figures. So you get this big box with a foam insert, all the figures inside. It was a very nice presentation, but they were pretty exclusive. They were made in pretty low numbers, and they were pretty expensive. So when they started putting these convention box sets out, I thought they were cool. I would see them online, but it was way out of my kind of realm of possibility of buying these things. For one, I'm in Canada. It was way too expensive for me to travel down to the States to go to these cons and get these sets. Also, I'm just not really a convention guy. I'm not really interested in doing that. So you could usually buy them online from like on eBay or something. So if the thing was already $300 to buy, in the States, somebody would get on eBay and sell it for $500, and that's American. You convert that to Canadian prices, you're talking like $700 for these things. Anyway, they were just very expensive, and they were kind of just out of my price range. And fortunately, I found most of the figures in those box sets were not essential. Like, you weren't really getting any unique characters most of the time. Like, it was often a character you already had, but with a new paint job. So even though it might have been cool, as long as I had that original version, I didn't feel I needed this new one. But by the time the modern era of G.I. Joe kicked off, this was in 2007. So the first couple of convention box sets that Fun Publications made involved the kind of the older construction of G.I. Joes, the O-ring construction. What's the little elastic in the waist that holds the figures together? But in 2007, Hasbro switched to a larger, more detailed 4-inch G.I. Joe. And they launched it as the 25th anniversary line. And it came out in 2007, which is 25 years after 1982, which is when the Real American Hero brand first launched. So the reason fans kind of just informally call it the modern line is because you can't really call it the 25th anniversary line because it morphed a number of times. It was really only the 25th anniversary line for the first year. And then they called it, I don't know, it went for a little, like 2 years maybe, and then in 2009 they switched over to doing the movie line for the Rise of Cobra, and then they brought the line back and called it Pursuit of Cobra. Then they did some lines based on the Resolute cartoon and the Renegades cartoon, and then there was the second live-action movie for G.I. Joe Retaliation, and then it was like the 30th anniversary of G.I. Joe's. So they were all constructed the same, and all these figures kind of like went together, but this was what we call the modern era. Anyway, so Fun Publications made the switch to start doing their box sets from the classic O-ring style to the modern style, and I was really all in on this modern style. I was really excited about these new 4-inch G.I. Joes. And then when they started putting these box sets out, this is when I really started saying, I kind of want to get this set. And initially, again, they didn't feel super essential. Like the first one they put out was called the Crimson Strike Team. And you basically got I think it was 12 identical Vipers in red. So I already had a Viper figure in the standard blue. So even though the red one looked nice, you're paying a lot of money to get 12 identical Vipers in red. And then you got the Baroness, who I already had. Instead of black, she was wearing red. And then you get the Crimson Twins, Tomax and Zaymont, and they were in red outfits instead of the standard blue. So cool, but not essential. But as the years went on, they started getting more and more essential, and they were adding more and more unique characters that were only available in these sets. So after, I think it was probably by about the third year, I said, okay, I'm going to have to start buying these sets. And I did. So I bought it from the third year right up till the end. So I think in total I ended up with maybe 6 or 7 of these box sets. And yeah, they were usually pretty cool. It was expensive, but I hesitate to say worth it, because they were just really cool figures, and most of these figures have gone up in value. So anyway, the 2013 set. I'm not really reviewing these in any order. I'm not sure why I didn't do 2013 earlier. It's a cool set. It was called Night Force Nocturnal Fire. And this was at the 2013 show that was held in Indianapolis, Indiana. So obviously I did not go to that show. But Fun Publications did allow for non-attendees to purchase the set, like to pre-order it in advance of the show, and then they mailed out those sets to non-attendees later. So I didn't have to go through eBay or anything. I was able to buy it direct from Fun Publications, which was great, but still very expensive with the shipping, the customs, the conversion to Canadian dollars. Yeah, these things are not cheap, but I think I've stressed that enough. Anyway, so the 2013 set, Night Force. Now, Night Force was a G.I. Joe sub-team that I was oblivious to as a kid. Because as a kid, I was collecting G.I. Joe right from the very first wave in 1982. Me and my older brother, we got those 82 figures, and we bought every G.I. Joe that came out every year. So 82, 83, 84, 85. We had the full sets. And a couple years into us collecting, Hasbro started re-releasing some of the earlier figures in new paint decos, which made perfect sense because there were some popular characters that kids that were just starting to collect, a couple years into the line would want. So rather than go back and just re-release the old figures, they just took the same figure and painted it in a new color scheme. So most famously, the G.I. Joe team had Tiger Force. So they took old classic characters and repainted them in all these tiger striped outfits, and they were like a special sub-team Tiger Force. For the bad guys, Cobra, they did the same thing with Python Patrol. They took all these previously released figures, painted them in this kind of cross-hatched, I guess, camouflage, and they called them Python Patrol. And me and my brother were aware of those figures because they were right on the back of the packaging. On vintage G.I. Joe cards, you could always flip them around, and you would see all the different figures that were available that year. But Night Force came out in 1988 and 1989. Now, what's weird about them is so they were Toys R Us exclusive figures, and they were not on the back of the packaging for the standard figures. So, if this was, the modern day, I would have heard about them on the internet, of course. But back then, there was no internet. I lived in Halifax, Nova Scotia at the time. We didn't have a Toys R Us, so we didn't get a Toys R Us catalog at Christmas time or anything. So I just had no idea these toys existed. Why would I? It's not like my neighbor would have them or anything like that. Nobody in my whole province would have these toys because there was no Toys R Us here. So Night Force they took a bunch of figures that had been either released like the year prior and put them in kind of darker color schemes of black and browns and greens, and they put out Night Force in these 2-packs. And so I was none the wiser, didn't know they existed. Now, mind you, when I got into collecting G.I. Joe as an adult, like a decade or so later, then I found out about those things on the internet, and I was like, oh, Night Force, where'd that come from? So anyway, this set here pays tribute to those Night Force figures. And normally, about this point in the video, I would hold up the big box set and I would show it to you. I kept all the boxes, but I've got them packed away. And I just did this kind of recently. I took out all my empty boxes. I put boxes inside of boxes and everything to store them as compact as possible. And I tucked them all away in my crawl space. And I really don't want to get it out just to show you an empty box. But, I'll put a cutaway in here. And there's not a whole lot to see on the box anyway. Like, the box is pretty nice. It's about, yay big. And it's got a nice glossy box and kind of a The bottom half of the box has a nice kind of texture to it. Feels almost like snake skinny. But for many years, the graphics on the box were kind of underwhelming. And you can probably see in the cutaway I've added here that the 2013 box set was not particularly exciting either. It's mostly just a big graphic that says Nocturnal Fire, some green lines coming out of it, and that's all there was to it. So nothing super interesting. The box sets did get better a couple years later, where they actually started putting images of the characters, like the vintage card art, right on the front of the box. And so that made it much more interesting to look at, the kind of thing you might want to put out on display. But for the 2013 set, that's nothing that needs to be displayed. Anyway, when you open that box set up, you get a foam insert with all the figures fit nice and snug in there. So you could display it that way. You could take the front of the box off, put it on a shelf or something, and it would actually display quite nice. You don't have to worry about the figures falling out or anything, because those things are snug. And they're all displayed. You can see every character nice and clearly. And then there's a nice little pin in the middle of the box set that says, 2013 Indianapolis Joe Con or whatever. So this little collectible pin. Underneath of that foam insert, you could take that foam out, and inside you would find a certificate of authenticity. You would find a comic book. So I think it was like pretty much a full-length comic book, the type of thing you would buy at a comic book store. But this was available. This was made by Fun Publications exclusively for this set. And it usually featured all the characters in the box set on like their own adventure. So even if you were buying this set and you weren't familiar with one or two of the characters in there, the comic book would give you some context about who that character is. And, so that was pretty cool. And then all the accessories, all the guns and backpacks and everything, that stuff would all be included underneath the foam insert as well. So pretty cool box set. But yeah, so mine is tucked away. I have all the figures out on display currently on my G.I. Joe shelf over here, which I'm going to bring the figures over and I'm going to show them to you one at a time. It's a pretty cool set, but I think I've talked about it enough here. You're probably tired of looking at me. So let's jump in and take a look at those 2013 convention figures. Now, before we get into reviewing all of the figures from the box set, I realized I wanted to talk just for another minute about kind of the state of G.I. Joe at this particular point in time. So, as I mentioned, I collected G.I. Joe from 1982 when it began, and the original Real American Hero line ran until 1994. But I only collected until 1989. So, me and my brother, we were completists from 82 to 89. For those 7 years, we bought every single carded figure that they put out, and a good chunk of the vehicles as well. So, there's some characters that I liked more than others, obviously, but every member of the G.I. Joe team was unique, and they all felt important to me. And so these characters here, these all came out pretty late in our collecting. Every single one of these 6 characters was released in 1988 for the first time, except for Psych-Out here, who was released in 1987. So even though they came in kind of late in my toy collecting of G.I. Joe, I still loved these guys. They saw a lot of action, as far as playtime. They went on lots of adventures. So I have a big attachment to these guys. My favorite out of this whole lot is Spearhead by a long shot. The reason for that, because as I mentioned, me and my brother Doug collected G.I. Joes together. And out of this lot of characters, the other 5 my brother owned when we were kids. So even though they might be cool characters, I didn't really play with them. We played together, but he used his toys, I used mine. So Spearhead and his cat Max were the only characters here that were mine. But anyway, I loved all these characters. So when the modern era of G.I. Joe started in 2007, it started giving us some of the main characters. We got Duke, we got Snake Eyes, and all that stuff. And as the years went on, they kept adding more and more characters. And my hope was that I would eventually get modern versions of all my classic figures. Like, I still love these vintage 80s toys, but they've taken a beating over the years. You can maybe see Spearhead's gun is broken here. A lot of my G.I. Joes, the elastic waistband is broken inside of them, so they're not even in one piece any longer. So these guys are kind of all packed away. They're not really display worthy for the most part. So I wanted nice new modern versions of all of them. But at the time that this box set came out, it was 2013. So when you consider the modern era had started in 2007, we were now in our 7th year of the modern era of G.I. Joe. I'd been collecting the modern era figures as long as I'd been collecting G.I. Joe in my childhood. And both the live-action G.I. Joe movies, I think, underperformed, and Hasbro did not seem to be supporting the brand very much at this point in time. A lot fewer figures were showing up at retail that you could buy at affordable prices. And the G.I. Joe Collectors Club was the primary source of action figures at that point in time. And there was basically two ways the Collectors Club was giving us action figures. It was either through their convention box sets or through their figure subscription service, which was another very pricey subscription that you could pay for. Each year they would do a subscription service, and over the course of 6 months, you would get 2 exclusive figures in the mail each month. So in 6 months, you'd end up with 12 new figures, and then on the last month, you'd get a bonus surprise 13th mystery figure. So that was great. The club was giving us a lot of new characters, but they were all really expensive. Like I said, the convention sets were really expensive, and the subscription services were about equally as expensive. So to get both each year, it was really getting pricey. I was spending more than $1,000 just to get, 25 G.I. Joe figures or something. So it was a lot. Anyways, so these characters here, by the time 2013 had come around, only one of these characters had a figure in the modern era, and that was Hit and Run. None of these other guys, including my favorite Spearhead, had action figures. So when the 2013 convention box set was announced, and we were getting all these characters, I was super excited. Because, I never really knew how much longer the G.I. Joe convention and the subscription services would go on. Every year you were kind of like, I hope there's another one. But you never know. They could close up shop at any time. And I really wanted to complete my modern collection. So knowing we were getting these characters was great. So that was a huge selling feature to get the Nocturnal Fire box set, because you were getting 5 characters on the G.I. Joe side alone that you did not have on your shelf in the modern era. Although the rub with that was, knowing that the Collectors Club was getting the pieces together and investing money in tooling new parts to give us these characters, it was almost a certainty that they would give us these versions of the characters subsequently, like either in a figure subscription service or maybe in a future box set. Because what you're looking at here, these are the regular retail releases that I owned as a kid of these characters that came out in 1988. It was only in 1989 when they were re-released in Night Force colors as a Toys R Us exclusive that I didn't know about. So the fact that the Collectors Club was giving us all these characters in their Night Force colors, that's cool that we were getting the characters, but we weren't getting kind of the iconic looks, the ones that I owned, the ones that they wore when they appeared in media, like in the comic books and such. So these are the looks I wanted. So even though I was excited to spend the money to get the box set to get these characters, I kind of knew that I might regret it because they were going to probably release them all in their classic colors later. And sure enough, they did. But we'll talk about that as we go through each of the unique characters. So anyway, there's a look at the characters that we got in this box set. So yeah, we'll start with Hit and Run. So here is the convention set Hit and Run. And this is Hit and Run version 3. So if we take a closer look at him here, it's a nice figure. It's got lots of gear. And I'm going to mention this early on. I usually display my figures with whatever gear they can carry. Sometimes they come with a lot of extra guns and knives and stuff, and I usually just throw that stuff in a spare parts bin. So in this review, most of these figures are going to be carrying a gun. That's not to say that these are all the accessories that came in the box set. There may very well have been additional weapons that I just don't have displayed with them. So this is not an absolutely complete review of the set. But anyway, so as far as accessories go, you can see he's got one rifle here, which I'm sure we've seen before. He's got another pistol that's tucked into this kind of holster on his chest, and he's got another small pistol holstered on his leg. Then he has this web gear, like these green straps here, which are removable. And then he's got this giant duffel bag, which is very awkward, and I'm surprised he's actually able to stand upright with it. And then you see this string hanging out, and on the other end of that string is this grappling hook, which I have tucked in the bag, but you see this is attached to the string. And that's because Hit and Run is like a mountain climbing trooper. The original figure also came with a duffel bag and rope and hook. So he's very true to that. Now, one thing that's kind of interesting about Hit and Run. So, well, first, I guess let's talk about the pieces that make him up. Now, I'll only drag out a figure for comparison if the pieces are noteworthy. So, with him, again, if you look at his torso, he's got these 3 kind of distinct pouches down the front of him. That is not exactly accurate to the vintage hit and run figure. And then this holster on the front, again, not exactly accurate. If we look at the very first hit and run figure from 1988, so you see here, he's got these kind of X-shaped strap with some grenades on them. He's still got the goggles on his helmet, but yeah, he doesn't have that same torso setup, so that's a little different. I'm not sure why they went with that. And they didn't give him any X'd web gear. I think that would have been kind of easy to do, but they did not. And I guess while we have this figure here, we'll talk a little bit about his main characteristic is the green camouflage skin and then the black makeup kind of crossed across his face. So this guy's in full camouflage. You could really imagine this guy hiding in some bushes in the jungle, and you really would not see this dude because he is fully camouflaged. And that made him very unique. Back in the 80s. He was the only Joe that was all painted up like this. So yeah, he was a really cool figure. So even though my brother owned him when we were kids, I always really loved Hit and Run. And when we did get a Hit and Run, as I mentioned, this is the only character that we actually had a modern figure of before this box set came out. So here is the modern Hit and Run. This is Hit and Run version 2. And he came out in 2009 as part of a Cobra Island box set. He came with 6 other G.I. Joe characters. And I thought this was a decent figure. Like, he obviously has the look. He's got the green camo on his face. He's got the removable helmet, which the vintage figure never had. So we can pop this off. I probably haven't removed this in years, so it's a little difficult. But there you go. So there you see Hit and Run without his helmet for the first time ever. And yeah, he has that X'd up web gear, so that's a lot closer to the vintage figure. And yeah, this guy's pretty cool. He's got his grappling hook with the rope. I don't think he came with a full duffel bag, but he may have. Anyway, so this was a pretty good version of Hit and Run. I was pretty satisfied with that. And it's interesting that they included Hit and Run in this Night Force box set, because he is the only character here that did not have a vintage Night Force counterpart. This guy was not included in those 88 or 89 figures. So why the club decided to add Hit and Run to this set, hard to say, but that's what we got. And he has got a brand new head sculpt. So this one here, he looks like kind of a cranky dude. He kind of reminds me of, I'm blanking on his name right now, the actor that plays Thanos and whatnot. Josh Brolin. Yeah, I definitely see some Josh Brolin in there. But anyway, so he's got a brand new head sculpt, which is nice. I always appreciate when the club gives us new head sculpts. It really makes characters feel unique. If I had to give one strike against this Hit and Run, even though he looks the part, it's that he's made up of all kinds of parts we've seen before, and that head is one of the most used heads in the modern era of G.I. Joe. It first came on, I think, Airborne was the first one, and we've got it on like 4 or 5 other guys. Now, the fact that it's painted green here with the paint helps it stand out, so he doesn't look identical to, say, Airborne. But getting a brand new unique head sculpt, it definitely gives Hit and Run his own personality. So as far as the other parts, the only other thing I was going to show you here is that his torso and his arms, they come from Lifeline here. So you can see he's got those 3 pouches on the front, and he's got the little holster for his gun. So this is what they went with. They took that torso when they made Hit and Run version 3, and then his legs and arms are kind of just mishmashes of other random G.I. Joe characters. So yeah, that's Hit and Run. Now, as I mentioned, the Collectors Club did give us superior, what I would say superior, or call them classic, whatever you want to call them, did give us the classic versions of these characters sometime later. So this figure came out in 2013, but in 2015, 2 years later, in their figure subscription service, the Collectors Club did give us this Hit and Run. So it's basically this same figure, except painted in his classic 1988 colors. So he's finally got that green skin on his forearms and on his face. He's got that black makeup on. So this Hit and Run, I think, is far superior to the Night Force version. This is the Hit and Run I'm looking for. He's got a very interesting paint job on his stubble there. I don't know if you can see it. It looks like it was printed off from like an old 80s dot matrix printer or something. It's kind of weird, but I actually kind of like it. But yeah, so pretty cool figure. And then before we move on, I'll just mention that we actually got that figure repainted again in 2015, the same year that the Collectors Club gave us this figure. Hasbro released their own version And this was another little sub-team they created. I think it was called Wolf Squadron, and they were all wearing like gray. So we got this gray version of Hit and Run with a variation of his like camo on his face and everything. So cool figures all around. I like every single one of these. But yeah, if I had to pick a favorite, definitely this guy. So next up, we'll take a look at Spearhead, and this is Spearhead version 3. Version 1 came out in 1988. Then the Night Force version, the original Night Force version, came out in 1989. Then we got this figure, the first of the modern era. And then the Collectors Club gave us a version 1 colored, like recolored version of this in 2015. So let's take a look at him. So this is the one I was most excited about, just because Spearhead, as I mentioned, he was the only one of those guys I had as a kid. And not only did I have him as a kid, but he was one of my favorites. I really did love that vintage Spearhead figure, despite its flaws, which will be evident in a second when I pull him out. See there, he's got the Night Force logo on his pack. So he's got the base body is this kind of dark brown, then he's got green boots and gloves, and then this web gear here. It looks a little weird because it's a vest, but it seems a little short, like it doesn't come all the way down to his belt, so it almost looks like a little crop top. So that's a little annoying, but it doesn't bother me enough, I guess. And then for the head, so I think that's a pretty good head for Spearhead. Like it looks enough like him. However, this was not a new head sculpt. This is another head that we got a lot. This head came from a Dusty figure. So we're getting that used again for the first time. And then his body is mostly, he's got a Cobra Trooper body, and then he's got Shock Trooper legs. Now, I didn't bother bringing out the Cobra Trooper to compare because when he's got this vest on, you can't even tell that it's the same like torso as the Cobra Trooper. But yeah, so he's got this helmet, and then he's got the goggles with the red visor, which matches up with the Hit and Run from the set. But what's weird is Spearhead never had goggles. Not on the original 88 figure or the Night Force 89 figure. So I'm not sure why they gave him goggles. Another thing that's kind of weird about this figure is it does not match the 89 Night Force figure that it's recreating. And I don't know why they would do that. The 89 figure was pretty solid black. So he still had green boots and everything, that's accurate, and he had a green vest. Or sorry, a brown vest. But instead of a darker brown for the pants and the sleeves, that was all kind of just jet black. So why didn't they do that this time around? I don't know. It doesn't really bother me because I did not have the vintage Night Force Spearhead, and I'm not like dying to recreate it. But if you had that classic 89 figure when you were a kid and you wanted to get a new version of it, you'd probably be scratching your head about why they cast the whole body in brown plastic instead of black. Another interesting choice is, so Spearhead's trusty sidekick Max, which is a bobcat. So he's orange. The original Max was orange. Now when the Night Force version came out in 89, they took the same cat from 88, except they cast it in solid black instead of orange, which is kind of weird because is this Spearhead, does he have a new cat with the same name, Max, or did he dye his cat black to go on night missions? I don't know. But anyway, for this updated version, Max here, so he's got paint, which is nice because the original Max did not have any paint. The original one was just solid orange. The second one was solid black. This one here, we've got eyes painted 2 tones. We've got his mouth. He's got white teeth and a red tongue in there. And then he's got these spots on both sides as well. So there's no articulation on him. And you can see how narrow he is. So he sometimes can topple over. He doesn't have a really strong base to stand on. But it's definitely an improvement for Max. So I like him quite a bit. So anyway, for comparisons, let's bring out that original Spearhead from 88. So I really did like this guy. I liked his kind of unique orange camo. I don't know if that's based on any real world camo. It seems pretty garish. But, maybe kind of for desert warfare. I don't know. But you can see how well they recreated it. He's got that bullet belt that goes across his torso. So they've done that again. Now the helmet, this is the thing that really bothered me about the vintage figure. To be honest, it didn't bother me that much, but it's clearly a goofy looking helmet. So the helmet is removable. And you can see he's just some dude with brown hair kind of brushed over to the side. So that's why that head works for him. but it is a head that we've seen a whole bunch of times, so it's kind of a shame to get it reused. But it wouldn't really be a wise investment for the Collectors Club to invest money to tool a new head just to look like this guy when you've got another head that's, you know, pretty close. So I don't blame them, and it doesn't really bother me. I think it looks good for Spearhead. So there you go. So yeah, the only other version of Spearhead, oh, I guess I should bring up Max here too. So that's the original 88 Max. So Bobcat, just solid orange. So yeah, in 2015, they gave us this Night Force figure. Whoops. But they painted him in his classic colors, and he is right here. So I really like this figure. He's got the same flaws in that he's got a little crop top vest, which is a little weird. But he's got that orange kind of deserty camo. It's not nearly as garish as the vintage one does. This is a lot more real world looking. But yeah, he retains all that, the bullet belt, the look. And you notice this time they didn't give him goggles. So he matches the vintage version much better. Got the pack. So he's looking good. And then we also get a new version of Max. So at least now he's orange again like he's supposed to be. But he's got a really nice paint job. I really like the kind of the black gums and the white teeth. Because compared to this guy here, it looked like he had some pretty serious chompers on him with all that white. But here I think it looks much more realistic. And they painted his nose, which is a nice touch. He's got all those spots, the two-tone body with the white and the orange. So this is definitely the best Max we've ever gotten. So yeah, very cool. I like this guy a lot. Definitely one of my favorites from the pack. So next up, we've got Psych-Out version 4. So this is a cool figure. Like I said, this was a character I was looking forward to getting. The original came out in 1987. So here is the original 87 figure. And, you know, he was kind of a weird figure. Like, he's got that antenna on the back of his head, this weird headpiece, this quilted vest, and I don't know what's going on with that thing on his chest. Just kind of a strange figure. And for people that really like the military aspects of G.I. Joe, this is the kind of figure where they kind of draw the line. But he was described, I don't have the file card in front of me, but it was like psychic warfare. He used sound waves or whatever to, you know, maybe attack the enemies, you know, mentally or something. So kind of a unique character in G.I. Joe lore. So yeah, version 1 came out in 87. In 88, we got the Night Force version, which was the Toys R Us exclusive. Then in 1991, we actually got a version 3, which I have, but I forgot to haul him out for this video. But he's so weird looking, you would never guess that he was the same character. It's a stupid figure. Anyway. So then we get this one here, which is version 4, and then we later got, in 2015, an updated version in the figure subscription service. So as far as parts go, he's got a brand new head, which I think they would have had to do, you know, because otherwise they could have maybe tried to find an existing head, but then they would have probably had to come up with this unique headpiece and maybe attach it to the head, and it probably would have looked bulky and weird. So I think they had to sculpt a new head with the headgear kind of attached to it. And it looks good. I like this head sculpt. It's definitely, you know, it looks like Psych-Out. Now, as far as the armor goes, it's, you know, it's pretty close. Again, the Collectors Club didn't have a huge budget to tool all new parts for these figures, so they tried to use what parts already existed in Hasbro's library. So what they've got here, they used a Duke torso and Duke arms. But the thing is, I don't actually have that version of Duke. Duke is one of those characters that they made so many versions of him that I just couldn't be bothered to buy every single one. And then he does have, I think he got Zartan legs. So at least he's not a complete replica of that Duke. Anyway, for accessories, you see he's got a machine gun. Might even be the same one that Hit and Run had, to be honest with you. And then he's got this weird doohickey with the satellite dish on it. Then he's got this backpack, which opens up. And I guess you can store stuff in there. I don't know what. And you'll notice, so he's got the black dish here. And you might have saw it fall off of him a second ago. But he's got these little satellite dishes that attach to his arms. He had 2 of those. And the other one must have fallen off on my shelf. I didn't see it there immediately. They don't grip very well. So they just kind of sit on him very loose. But one thing that's interesting is, so this vintage figure also had those little dishes, which I don't have with him right now. but they were red. Then when the Night Force version came out in 88 or 89, they were black. So when the Collectors Club gave us this guy, he's in his Night Force colors, but they gave us red dishes. So this was red, and the things on his arms were red, which was strange. I'm not sure why they did that, but I think it was a mistake, because when they did give us the repainted version of Psych-Out in 2015, and here he is. You see, I've got red dishes on him now. This figure actually came with the black dishes, which was clearly wrong, but I think they knew probably a lot of collectors would have already bought the Night Force version, so by giving this figure black little satellite dishes, we could swap them with the Night Force version, which is what I've done here. So you see he's got his red little dish there on his accessory, and he's got the two red ones on his arms. He's also got this weird backpack with like solar panels on it, which again is true to the original figure, but I don't have his gear with me. So yeah, again, I like this figure much better. I like that the colors are, much more reminiscent to the figure that I grew up with. I like that his hair is blonde, like the other one there. I'm not sure why Hasbro sometimes changed guys' hair colors like this. Am I supposed to believe that he dyed his hair? I don't know. Maybe if he's on night missions, he doesn't want this like neon yellow hair. But yeah, it's a cool figure. One thing you might notice here, he seems to have a bit of a hunch. Just the way that head sits on the torso they used, he can't really look upright. So that's as good as it gets. So you can kind of prop him up a little bit, but he's always kind of looking down a little bit. So that's a bit of a strike against this figure. But overall, pretty cool. I like him. So next up, let's take a look at Repeater version 4. So this is a big figure. Right off the bat, I'm just going to bring Psyche-Out back out here for a second. And you can see how much taller Repeater is. That's one thing that's really cool about the modern G.I. Joes, is that there was a lot more diversity as far as the size, the height of these figures. Back in the vintage days, all the figures were essentially the same build. So it's nice to get a little bit of variety here. But yeah, this is a really great figure. And out of all of these 6 Joes, this is the one where I might even like the Night Force colors better than the standard colors, because he just looks really good in these dark colors here. So it's a really nice figure. I like that head sculpt a lot. It's got a lot of personality. It really looks like a real person. I believe this is a dude, if that makes any sense. I like that head a lot. Anyway, and the body's really good too. Like a lot of detail there. You see he's really beefy, and he's got all these kind of veins in his arms and stuff there. He's got this great vest with all these pouches here. Lots of little sculpted detail. You'll notice he's got a weird little groove on his leg, like something's missing. He's got that on both sides. We'll talk about that in a second. He's also got a sheath on his leg here. Now, I'm just going to grab the vintage figure first. This is the original 1988 Repeater. So you can see here he's got that same style hat. His face, it's unique, but it looks a little more Jay Leno on this one. I think he looks a lot better in the new version. He's also got a big padded vest with all these pouches and stuff, so I think they did a good job recreating that. He's got his sleeves rolled up, just like the new version and everything there. So on the legs, it's a little different. He doesn't have those straps and stuff there, so some of those details have changed. But otherwise, I think they've done a pretty good job recreating this figure. The key difference, of course, being the paint job. But that's because this is the original Repeater. The Night Force version was released in 1989 in these colors, but I do not have that one here to bring it for comparison. So this here is version 4, and he's got a brand new head sculpt, which is great. Now the rest of the body, from the neck down, is actually a complete reuse of a movie Roadblock figure from 2013. So this here is Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson as Roadblock. And you see here, he's got those big beefy arms with the veins and everything there. So this is all the same. And you'll notice he's got these holsters that hold these kind of weird weapons he had in the movie. So they unplugged those, and that's why Repeater has those holes in his legs. But otherwise, he still has the sheath there. It's the exact same. So that explains why Repeater looks so large, because he's got the Rock's body. Anyway, so new head sculpt and reused body. And here's the same figure we get. This is version 5. that came out in the figure subscription service later. So you can see it's the exact same figure. He's got the same vest. They've changed up his accessories some. So he's still got a cool gun, but it's nowhere near as cool as this big crazy chain gun this guy has. It's got a big bullet belt there that comes off. The bullet belt can attach to the backpack there with that little slot on the side. So yeah, this version lost some of those accessories, but it's still a pretty cool figure. And I like that he looks more like the vintage figure with the digital camo and everything like that. So I like that version a lot, but I really like the Night Force one too, and I'm hard pressed to say which one I like better. Both are really good. So yeah, if you were paying attention, version 1, version 2, Night Force that I don't have, this being version 4, and this being version 5. So you might be wondering about version 3, and I'll quickly bring him out here, but this guy doesn't strike me as Repeater. Now, I know I said Hit and Run was the only one of these 6 Joes that we already had a figure in the modern era, but when it comes to Repeater, they put out a figure. Version 3 came out in 2009. And in 2009, Hasbro was making their Rise of Cobra action figures. So they kind of moved away from the 25th anniversary line, which was based on retro 80s figures. And now they were making figures based on the live action movie. So you had figures that looked like Channing Tatum, that looked like Marlon Wayans. But once they got beyond the actors, they continued to make G.I. Joes in the Rise of Cobra aesthetic, but just characters that didn't appear on screen. So one of the characters they gave us was Repeater, and here he is. Now, obviously, there's a pretty big difference here. So now he's African American. He's got a shaved head. Still got a big gun with bullets and all that sort of stuff. But it just seemed like an odd choice. Like, it would make a little bit more sense if they'd actually cast an actor, a black actor to play Repeater, because that's kind of what happened with Marlon Wayans playing Ripcord. Ripcord was historically a white character that cast a black actor. So, of course, the figures based on that guy from the movie are black. But here, this guy didn't even appear on screen, so I don't know why they changed the race of Repeater for this figure. And he even has the same name on the file card. So dating back to the original figure in 88, his name is Jeffrey Theron on the back of the card, and that's what this guy's real name is on the back of the file card too. So they're even acknowledging he's like the same person. This isn't just another guy that took the code name Repeater. But yeah, it's not Repeater to me. I think it's a fine figure, which is why I ended up buying it, but I totally see this as a different character. So anyway, there you go. So those are my Repeaters. So next up, we've got Charbroil, and this is Charbroil version 5. This is the G.I. Joe's second flamethrower trooper, the original one being Blowtorch. So let's take a look at him. So he's got this weird bug-like helmet, which I don't know if that's based on anything real world. It certainly doesn't look like anything I would imagine. And I don't think they haven't had flamethrower troopers since World War II, I don't think. So anyway, he's a weird character. He's a weird figure. He had a weird look, but I always liked him. So, and an interesting thing, this is just a weird little side note for me, but like when this figure came out, my brother Doug got him, and he got him at the exact same time that I got Shockwave, which is the G.I. Joe SWAT trooper. And Shockwave quickly became my favorite G.I. Joe character, and I made him ridiculously strong. Like he would take on the whole Cobra army himself. He'd run to the front lines and just punch out Cobra Commander and everything like that. And that's because I loved that figure. Now my brother had the original Charbroil. He didn't necessarily love Charbroil as much as I loved Shockwave, but because I had this new super powered guy on my G.I. Joe team, Doug kind of made Charbroil the equivalent. So they both joined the team at the same time, and they would both go up there and kick ass all by themselves. So yeah, I have a fondness for Charbroil because in mine and my brother's world, he was the best friend of my favorite G.I. Joe. So anyway, cool figure. I know I kind of just moved. I was telling my story when I was talking past him here, but so cool helmet, cool pack, really cool flame accessory on the end of his flamethrower. We never saw anything like that in the vintage line, so that's a really cool new addition. But yeah, cool figure. I like this guy. And so first we'll bring up version 1. So this is the 1988 version. This is the one that my brother had that kicked all kinds of ass. So you see here, he's got this flamethrower gun. There was actually a hose that connected this gun to the backpack. He's got this kind of weird sci-fi type of look. He's got that same bug-like helmet. and he's in these orange and yellow colors, which would make sense for a flamethrower trooper, I suppose. Now, an interesting thing about him is you could pop his helmet off, and he's got this kind of rather ugly, gingery mug underneath his helmet. And this was a head that we had seen reused a couple of times in the vintage line. But anyway, so that's what he looks like underneath the helmet. So that's version 1. Version 2 came out in '89, and that's when we get the Night Force version. So it was this figure, except in these colors. But again, I don't have that vintage Night Force one. Then we got... there was another version of him that came out in 2004. So that was... I don't have that figure either. He was part of a box set called the Anti-Venom Task Force or something like that. So I don't have that figure. But that was, again, like another repaint. Then we got a Rise of Cobra figure. So I guess I kind of lied to you again. So similar to Repeater, we got a movie-based version of this character, even though this character did not appear in the movie. But he's in that kind of movie aesthetic. And I don't really consider those movie versions to be the same character. It doesn't feel like a true update of the classic character. However, the Charbroil one is much closer than the Repeater version. So here is Charbroil from the Rise of Cobra line. And you can see he's got that the orange base body with the silver pads, like the silver armor, and he's got the yellow highlights. He's got the hose with the flamethrower. So he's very true to the original Charbroil. And he even has kind of a weird sci-fi helmet. But it's not the same. Like this looks more like almost a pilot. It doesn't look like a weird bug. So even though I think this look is actually really cool and I like this figure quite a bit, it still just doesn't really work for me as Charbroil. And they've done something interesting here. His helmet is not removable, but you can see he's got this reflective chrome head underneath of this helmet. So you can kind of see it underneath his chin there. So that gives kind of a cool look, so you get that reflective visor. And I don't think they've ever done that on any other G.I. Joes ever. So it's kind of a weird thing they've done there, but it's cool. I like this figure. Now, out of all 6 of these Night Force Joes that came in this box set, so this was 2013. In 2015, in the figure subscription service, we got 5 of the 6 of them redone in their classic colors. Charbroil is the one character it took a little bit longer. We didn't get him until 2017. So 4 years later, they finally repainted this figure and included him in a later figure subscription service. So here is what I would say is finally an update to that classic 88 Charbroil figure. You can see here, he looks spot on. He's got the same weapons and everything as the Night Force one. His flame, I think, looks a little better in the orange. He's got that backpack there. He's got the buggy helmet with the red eyes, and so really cool stuff. I like this figure a lot. But one thing that's kind of interesting to note before we move on, so when it comes to this figure, talking about the pieces he's made out of, so he's primarily made out of the G.I. Joe Trooper from 2012. So this is supposed to be kind of just a generic trooper. He was part of the Retaliation line, the second live-action movie. And so you see here he's got like a helmet you can put on over him. He came with a whole bunch of accessories. He's got this big, huge backpack with all these weapons. But anyway, from the neck down, this is the body that Charbroil uses. A little bit to his detriment, because this figure here, you see how he's leaning? He's got these big cuffs on his pants, and it never really allowed him to stand upright. So he was always kind of had this weird lean to him. And it's the same of these Charbroil figures. The way those cuffs on those pants sit, it just makes him a little awkward. So that's kind of a bummer about this figure. But anyway, with this figure here, underneath his helmet, you pop it off, and he's a gingery guy, just like the vintage figure. And it's not a bad, like it looks pretty close, I think, to this head. It's not identical, but no, now I can't get this thing off again. Of course, there we go. So there he is. There's nothing super defining about him. He's just kind of a redhead guy. So I think this head works fine. This head is not a new piece. It came from an actual kind of an odd source in that we got this figure here. This is the Aqua Viper that came out in 2009 as part of the G.I. Joe movie line. Again, this character did not appear in the movie, but they kind of released this figure in the movie aesthetic, kind of the, the toned down movie colors. And a figure like this, which is just a generic Cobra Trooper, you would expect him not even to have a face. Like, he would just have a visor that you couldn't even see through. But for whatever reason, they sculpted a new head for this Cobra Trooper, which is just very odd. And if you take the helmet off, there you go. You got this head. And, he looks very friendly to be a Cobra terrorist trooper. Anyway, that's the head they reused. They just repainted it, and they gave us this guy. So, interesting source. But then what is also interesting is that when we got this version here, for all the other versions, when they took the Night Force and redid it, they just repainted it in the classic colors. And that's basically what they did here. Except, when you take his helmet off, he's got this masked, like, beachhead head, which is kind of strange. I actually think it's really cool. I like this look. But yeah, I don't know what made them decide to do this instead of just giving him this head again. But anyway, just kind of an oddity little thing. But anyway, Charbroil is really cool. I like this figure a lot, so I was glad to get an update of him in this set. So the last of the Joes we have to look at from the box set is Muskrat, and he is the G.I. Joe Swamp Trooper. So let's take a closer look at him. So, he's got lots of little sculpted details there. Some pouches on his legs. You see he's got a gun holstered there with like a removable silencer, I think, on the side there. He's got a sheath for a knife on his leg. He's got a big machete. He's got a machine gun there. And then he's got his removable hat, which it looks like it might have stained his head. Anyway, the hat doesn't stay on super great. It's a little loose. But anyway, there you go. Now, I'll be honest, Muskrat is not one of my favorite characters. He's probably my least favorite from this set. And I don't like the parts choice, I guess. Like, even the original Muskrat that was released in 88. So we already saw him. He's in two parts. I have to be careful sliding him around here. So there's the original Muskrat. And here's his upper half. So I didn't love this figure, but I don't mind him. Like, I think he looks okay. He's got that, I don't know what you call that hat. But you see he's got his little swamp surfboard that plugs into his back there. That's his swamp skimmer or something. I forget what they called it. But he's not a bad looking figure. Now, anyway, they sculpted a brand new head for this figure. Now, the rest of the body, I'm not going to bother bringing anybody to compare to. The torso is from Alpine. But you can't really tell that because they both have different kind of removable vests over top of it. And then he's got some Duke arms and some Snake Eyes legs. But the head is new. And for this to be a brand new sculpted head, like, sure, it looks unique, but I don't like it. Like, he looks, I don't know, he kind of looks like a cross between Archie and Jughead to me. He's got that red hair from Archie, and he's got kind of the pointy nose of Jughead. I don't know. I just don't like it. So I actually prefer this look, even though it's, it's a softer look. They didn't have as much detail in their faces. I just don't think this guy looks like this guy. And I think it's for the worse that they changed him. So anyway, not to say it's a bad figure. It's just, he's my personal preference. I don't love it. Anyway, so there was the first version of him in 88, which we've got here. Then they repainted him in these colors, the black and the blue, in 89, which I don't have. Then there was kind of a weird update in 1993. So similar to Psych-Out, he got a total makeover, and I don't think it really worked for him. And I don't even know if I have that figure, to be honest. I didn't look to dig it out. But then this here is version 4. And then, as I mentioned with everybody else, we got a version 5 from the figure subscription service in 2015. So here we go. Here's that same figure, but now painted in the classic colors. And you can see here he's even got his little swamp, little surfboard, which he did not have in the Night Force set. At least I don't think he did. So, yeah. This is definitely better as far as I'm concerned. But, he's still got that head that I don't like. And, yeah, I just don't think he's a particularly interesting figure. But there you go. If you're a big Muskrat fan, hopefully you enjoy it. But anyway, that's it for the G.I. Joe side of things. So let's move on to Cobra. So the first Cobra we're going to look at is the Saw Viper. Now, as you can see, I've got 3 of them here. that's because whenever the Collectors Club put out these box sets, they always gave us some duplicates. It made sense for them as a cost-saving measure. And to be honest, a lot of fans wanted this. And for me, I think this is the perfect setup. Like, if you look at that, the set with the Crimson Strike Force, that was way too much. You got 3 unique characters, and then you got 12 troopers. Like, you don't need 12 identical figures, especially at the price that they're charging for these. But when you put a trooper like this in the box set, if you only gave us 1, then that would drive some fans and collectors crazy because, they like to have little squads of any of these troops. So I think 3 is the perfect number for a little squad. But any more than that, it starts to feel like just the Collectors Club being lazy. So yeah, we got 3 Saw Vipers, and I'm totally fine with that, even though I'm not a big fan of the Saw Viper. So the original Saw Viper, which stands for Semi-Automatic Weapons, came out in 1990. So if you recall, I said I collected G.I. Joe until 89. So this was the year that I kind of stopped collecting. So I did not buy the original Saw Viper in 1990. Here he is. And yes, he has a ridiculously big semi-automatic weapon. But yeah, he was kind of a weird looking villain because he's purple. And then he's got this cycloptic green visor. Like, it's just a weirdly shaped helmet. I just thought he was kind of goofy looking. And then the weird thing about the Saw Viper is he kind of gained some notoriety because in the G.I. Joe comic book, the war went on between G.I. Joe and Cobra for years and years and years, just like in the cartoon. And for the most part, nobody ever got hurt, because you've got all these main characters, you couldn't kill anybody off. So there was an issue of G.I. Joe when a Saw Viper, just some nameless Saw Viper, he killed like 7 or 8 popular G.I. Joe characters. He put them all in a trench and then he just blew them away. And it was pretty shocking because you did not get G.I. Joes dying in the comic very much. So to lose that many of them in one fell swoop was crazy. And, they didn't let Storm Shadow or Cobra Commander kill them. They just let some generic Saw Viper. So that's why this guy's, kind of popular, I suppose. But yeah, I never liked the look of him. Anyway, so we got the original 1990 Saw Viper. Then in 2003, we got version 2, which was this same figure repainted in Python Patrol colors. And then in 2006, we got another update of him, which was kind of weird. They kind of changed his color scheme to kind of black and like black and red, black and maroon. And it was with that figure, that was the first time that he had a removable helmet. And so he had just a full face underneath there, so you could see what his head looked like. They actually just reused, I want to say barrel roll's head or roll bar. Yeah, they used roll bar's head, and then they just put this helmet on top of it. And it was this exact helmet. So it's got the cycloptic kind of visor, and it's got the little mouthpiece. So, it's clearly inspired by this helmet, but it's not quite right. It lacks some of the weirdness of it. And I found it sat weird on that figure from 2006. It just didn't really look right. Anyway, so then when we get these versions, this is the first modern era Saw Viper. So this is Saw Viper version 4. You can see how, like, there's similarities, but they've also strayed pretty far from the original too. So this guy's got these kind of weird, unique boots that come up, these thigh-high boots and everything. This guy, they don't have that at all. They've got a totally... And you can see they're more pink than they are purple. So the pink's kind of a weird choice. And then they've got this, like, balaclava head. And then they just took this helmet from 2006. So it's a little odd. They don't usually use pieces from the prior line because, they weren't really in scale. There's a half an inch difference in size. But this helmet was kind of oversized when they first made it, so it kind of works here, I guess. But I still think it looks a little goofy and doesn't really match up with the original Saw Viper. So I don't mind this look. And, like, it's okay. Like, the body is made up of a couple different Destro parts. This big vest, I don't know if that's reused from another character or it might have been something they newly tooled up for the Saw Viper. It's not bad. That balaclava head, that actually comes from an Airborne figure from 2013. So this guy came out as part of the Retaliation G.I. Joe line. So they just kind of gave him this generic balaclava head, and that's what they reused for these guys here. And, you know, even though they have a machine gun, it's nowhere near the monster that this one is. So, you know, these guys are fine. They were not really a highlight of the set for me in any way. I didn't really care for the original. I don't particularly care for the updates. Now, we actually did get a version 5 of the Saw Viper sometime later. It was 2016 during the what they called the 50th anniversary line of G.I. Joe. And they reused a lot of the same parts. But at least now he's in purple instead of pink. He's still got the balaclava head, and he's got that same helmet. Gold visor now instead of green. He's lost, his vest isn't nearly as bulky as the ones that came in the convention set. But yeah, I don't know if I like this guy better. I probably do. I think the purple and black just looks a little better than the pink on pink. But anyway, there you go. That is the Saw Viper. So here is the other trooper type that we got in the box set. So this is the Frag Viper version 3. So we get 3 of them again. So again, perfect number. But as far as trooper goes, this is again not one of my favorite Cobra troopers. Like, I'm glad we got this guy in the modern era, but there's probably other troopers, like say the Hydro Viper or the Toxo Viper, that I would have preferred. But anyway, this is what we got. So the first Frag Viper came out in 1989, and here he is. Very weird design, because he's got this very kind of science fiction, kind of alien bug-like helmet, and then, I don't know, it's like a very plain brown outfit, almost like he's wearing like a potato sack when you see the stitching down the front, and then this sash that kind of just is randomly draped all around him. Like, I don't know what the designers were thinking on this guy, but it is just a very weird figure, and I never really cared for it. I never really understood it, and his weapon was weird too. Like, he had a gun, but he also had this piece, which I've never really been able to figure out how to get it attached to him properly. But what you're looking at here is a little basket for him to throw grenades, hence the name Frag Viper. But it's based off of the sport Jai Alai, which I think originated in India. So you might have seen them. They have these kind of baskets on their hands, and they throw a ball at a wall. And but anyway, these guys throw grenades through this little curved basket. So weird design, weird military specialty. But anyway, yeah, so that's what we got. So that's version 1 from 89. We did get a repaint of this figure in 2006. It was a convention exclusive again. As part of, not a box set, but kind of a little mail-away special that the Collectors Club did. And then this is version 3. This is the third and final version of the Frag Viper thus far. This is the only one we got in the modern era. And he carries over the design pretty well to his detriment, because he's got that helmet, which is very true to the original. Like, it looks like they pretty much just copied that over exactly. So very bug-like, alien-like. It looks cool. It's a cool helmet. But then the body, like, it doesn't have the potato sack look that the vintage one had, but it's got almost like a superhero look. It's spandex tight on this guy, and it's just bizarre looking. Like, look at how scrawny his legs are, and then he has those little anklet boots. Like, I don't understand. Like, it's just bizarre looking. He still has the Jai Alai little basket on his hand, which I've got barely hanging on there, but it doesn't clip on there very well. He's still got the weird sash. This time it's got like a armored shoulder piece here. Like, again, it's just the weirdest figure. I don't know what's going on with this guy. So I've got 3 of them. They're all the same. No differences here. You see, I didn't even bother trying to fit the basket on these 2 guys' hands, probably because they fall off too easy. So I got lucky that it seems to be staying on this one figure. But, yeah, weird. And anyway, as far as this figure goes, he's actually got all new parts. And that's pretty much unheard of for a G.I. Joe Collectors Club figure. You know, they sculpt new heads. That's pretty common. And then they sculpt new weapons and stuff. Maybe some new web gear, like the sash and stuff. But they would put it on an existing body. But at the time when we got this set, this was a brand new sculpt. We hadn't seen anything like that. However, I'm sure that the Collectors Club didn't kind of front the whole bill for this body, because later that same year we actually did get a release from Hasbro, like a retail release of Snake Eyes, and this Snake Eyes uses that same body. So again, that really skinny, you can see there, it works better on him because it doesn't look like he's got little ankle boots on. He's got some sort of ankle strap, as opposed to these guys. The way they painted that, it looks like it's a little booty, but it doesn't look the same way on Snake Eyes. But yeah, I don't love this super tight spandex outfit on Snake Eyes either, but it makes a little more sense for him. And I think with the accessories they put on him, like the grenades and everything, it kind of hides it a little bit more. You can't tell that it's so friggin' tight. But this guy looks weird. So I guess Hasbro must have given them kind of early access to some new tooling they had coming up in the year. So arguably maybe the only new piece is the head. But we did get this figure first, technically. So anyway, there you go. That's the Frag Viper. So the last 3 figures in the box set are unique Cobra soldiers. So we've already covered the kind of generic trooper types. So now we're going to take a look at Cobra Letal. Now this guy might look familiar to you because he is, for all intents and purposes, just another Frag Viper. So if we bring Frag Viper back out here again, you can see these guys have the exact same head sculpt, the exact same body, the exact same like weirdo sash and belt. The only thing that has changed is their accessories. So he's got some gold accessories, a bazooka and a gun. But otherwise, and also the backpacks are different. So this guy has a backpack that's got all these sculpted grenades, which he would use to throw with his little basket. Whereas this guy's got a kind of like, it looks like mortar shells or something, I guess, for his bazooka, all in gold. So, yeah. And this is Cobra Letal version 1. So this is the first and only Cobra Letal that has ever been released in G.I. Joe lore, at least in North America. And that's kind of what, as far as Hasbro is concerned, that's all that really counts, I guess. So what this figure is based on is that in 1992, because the G.I. Joe toys were like licensed all over the world, like over in Europe they were called Action Force, and they were called all kinds of different things in all kinds of different countries. Anyway, in Brazil, I can't remember what they called the brand, but they would take existing figures and they would repaint some of them, they would rename some of them kept the original names. Anyway, they repainted the Frag Viper figure, the original one that I had out here a minute ago, and they re-released it with this green body, and they called it Cobra Letal. So they kind of made him his own unique character in Brazil. And I, like most collectors in North America, had no idea this toy existed. Like, it not only was it released pretty late in the vintage line, which I said ran until 1994, and that figure came out in 92, only in Brazil. So, and that was before the internet and stuff still, so like, how would I know about some toy that was only released in Brazil? No idea about that. But once kind of, fans like me kind of grew up and we started collecting G.I. Joes again in the 2000s, and the internet was, readily available to us. There was all kinds of news sites and everything. We started finding out about all these foreign repaints of G.I. Joes, and they became highly sought after. So I don't know how much an actual 1992 Cobra Letal from Brazil will run you, but it'd probably be about the same as what this whole box set cost me in the first place. So I think it's pretty cool when the club would go and give you a foreign repaint like this. So some people might see this as a wasted spot because they just want, redos of the characters they grew up with. But I really appreciate them throwing some curveballs like this to us every once in a while. So I think Cobra Letal, it's cool, although, it just suffers from being on kind of a weak figure anyway. Like I told you, I didn't necessarily love this Frag Viper, so obviously I don't necessarily love the build of Latal, but I like the idea of Latal. And the comic book that came with the set kind of expanded on this character for the first time for North American audiences too. So we get to learn a little bit about this guy. So yeah, that's Cobra Letal. Kind of neat. Now this here is probably an even bigger curveball from the Collectors Club in that they've given us Crimsom Asp version 1, and she's not based on any prior figures, foreign or not. Whoops. This is a brand new character they created for this box set. So again, that might piss some people off. They're paying for this expensive set. They want the characters that they grew up with. But, I think the G.I. Joe line, in order for it to really grow, you can't just keep doing the same characters over and over again. I like when they insert new characters every once in a while. And I think Crimson Asp is pretty cool. She's a nice addition. So you can see she's got a flamethrower there, the flamethrower backpack. She also has that little weird gun that she just dropped. So yeah, pretty cool. Now, the only thing about her is she doesn't have as much of a neck, I feel. She looks a little squatty. But with the head sculpt there, the red hair, the eye patch, it's pretty cool. You know, she's unique. Now, as far as the build goes, so you'll notice on her chest, she's got the Cobra logo. It's not just painted there, it's actually sculpted. So that chest and these arms with the gloves that kind of come out like this is all based on a previously released Baroness figure. So you see here, she's got that sculpted Cobra, she's got the gloves like that. So that's all Baroness. But then the legs, you'll notice, are different. This one, rather than having those lines there indicating the thigh-high boots, she's got these knee pads, and she's got this some pouches on the side and everything. So she's actually got the legs of Agent Helix. So they took those legs, they plopped them on Baroness's torso, and there you go. And even with those mixed parts, then they gave her this skirt piece, which is new and unique. And yeah, it kind of blends those two together pretty well. And yeah, she comes together as a pretty cool character. So I like her quite a bit. She is supposed to be an Irish saboteur working with Cobra. And if you like this character, a couple of years later, the Collectors Club, in one of their figure subscription services, gave us this figure, which is another original creation by them. And this is supposed to be her father, with a very cheesy name, Coils O'Doom. So, you know, if you're into some new characters, and I think these guys are kind of a fun addition to Cobra, and it's nice to display them together on my shelf. Now, this last figure here is probably my favorite from the set. You know, him and Spearhead, it's kind of head-to-head, but this guy kind of wins out just for his unique aspects. So this here is Cobra Mortal, and this is Cobra Mortal version 2. Now, this guy might look a little familiar because that head, that's Snake Eyes' head, and Snake Eyes has a pretty unique head. Now, you know, Snake Eyes actually has two unique heads, because this is kind of the way Snake Eyes originally looked in the first toy back in 1982, and how he first looked in the comics and the cartoons when he had this visor and he was just the G.I. Joe Saboteur. But then a couple years later, they kind of introduced the whole ninja element to him, and they gave him the visor, which is probably even more of a famous look. But this look here with the goggles and the kind of almost like paintball mask looking thing, and then the sweater here, the kind of cable knit sweater, that's very much Saboteur Snake Eyes. So, what Cobra Mortal is he's like Cobra Letal. So this is one of those characters that was originally released in Argentina, and fans never knew about this. Like, North American Joe fans did not know these figures existed. So, pardon me if I screw up some of this history a little bit, but like early on in my collecting days, as an adult, I found out about this character called Cobra Mortal that was released in Argentina. And basically it was the original 1982 Snake Eyes figure, except he was half red and half chrome metal, like Destro. And he was just this very weird, mismatched, you know, he was not symmetrical. It was a very weird design. And he was a Cobra character. He had a Cobra logo on him. So I don't know what they were thinking in Argentina, that they would take Snake Eyes and turn him into a weird chrome villain. But that's what they did, and that became a highly sought-after collectible, much more so than I would say Cobra Letal even. You know, collectors really scrambled to get that Cobra Mortal figure. And then the G.I. Joe Collectors Club actually reproduced that figure pretty much exactly for their 2006 JoeCon set. That's when they were still doing box sets based on the old vintage style with the O-ring. So they did a recreation of that O-ring Cobra Mortal. And I really wanted to get that figure. I thought it was super cool because I knew I would never get the original version. But even then, the collector's box set was too expensive for me back in 2006, so I did not buy it. But even as an adult collector, it was a couple years into my collecting that this figure was discovered. Apparently there was another version of Cobra Mortal released in Venezuela, and it was a Snake Eyes repainted with a chrome head like Destro, but then an all-white body with a red Cobra logo. And he was also named Cobra Mortal. And so that was kind of like a newly discovered figure, and fans were freaking out and clamoring to get that figure. So the Collectors Club paid homage to that newly discovered foreign repaint with this figure here. This is why this figure is officially called Cobra Mortal version 2, because version 1 would be the 2006 box set release, and then this one. So those are the two North American versions of Cobra Mortal. So we have one in the O-ring style with the red and the chrome, and one in the modern era with the chrome head and the white body. So as far as Cobra Mortal goes, so I mentioned this was a character I really wanted. There was another foreign repaint called Cobra Diaco, and I thought that one was even cooler. I really wanted Cobra Diaco, and the G.I. Joe Collectors Club released a version of him in one of their earlier box sets. And I absolutely adore this figure, even though it's just a Snake Eyes head on Flash's body, repainted with yellow pads instead of red pads, and the head is kind of that, reflective chrome. I just love the concept behind it. I love the idea that this was, a foreign exclusive that collectors never knew about. And I was so happy to get a modern version of him because I knew I would never get the vintage one. So my wife bought me this for a present one year before we were married or anything. But yeah, this was perhaps my favorite gift that she's ever bought me was this guy here. Although just a couple of years ago, she bought me something else, which was super cool. So this is not related to this box set in any way. I just feel like showing it off. So this here, that is the vintage Cobra Mortal. So that's the 1982 Snake Eyes on a 1982 Flash body. And this is what this figure would have looked like when it was released in Brazil. So that is what the G.I. Joe brand was called, Commandos Amaco, however you pronounce that. That was the company, Estrella, that released them. This, on the back of the packaging, you see, all the names of the characters that they've changed. So this is not original. This is a fan-made replica of the original Cobra Diaco. But I absolutely love this. I think this is super cool. So I just keep this kind of pinned up on my wall. So yeah, both really, really awesome collectibles. So you can see that I'm really into these foreign repaints. So I love Cobra Diaco. When they brought him over here in North America, you can see they renamed him Steel Cobra. But I absolutely loved this figure. So a couple years later, when they did the same thing with Cobra Mortal, I was also super thrilled about this guy. Now, the only thing that's kind of a bummer about this figure is I think the parts they used, they don't quite work as well. Like the head and the torso are made from what I think is the best Snake Eyes figure ever released. So this one here, which I believe is from the same year, this is from the Pursuit of Cobra line. So yeah, he's got that great commando head. I think the proportions of this figure are just like spot on. I love the detail of that vest. But you can see here the legs on this guy. He's got kind of like a baggier pants. He's got combat boots. I would have rather them just take this figure and paint this one white and give him a silver head, and then I think he would have been absolutely phenomenal. I appreciate that they tried to, change it up and make it not just a straight repaint, but the legs they gave him here, it just does not really work for me. So, yeah, I don't know. So the legs are, like from Flash, they're actually the same legs we get here, but they change the upper legs so that he doesn't have the pads. So he's got, Snake Eyes' torso and arms, then he's got these other legs from another figure, and then he's got these lower legs from another figure. And you can kind of tell they just weren't all meant to go together. I think he's just kind of, his proportions seem a little off. His legs are a little too skinny. So I love the idea of him. This figure is almost a perfect 10, but I think the parts choices kind of bring it down a little bit. But anyway, I think this is a really fun character, and I'm really glad that he was included in this set. So one last thing before I wrap this up. Usually when I've done these convention box set videos, I usually talk about the other figures that were convention exclusives that were not included in the box set. As I mentioned in the intro, there's often figures that you can buy with vehicle. There's usually a free figure that they throw off the roof as a parachute drop figure. Anyway, this video has already gone pretty long, and I don't have any of the other exclusives from the 2013 convention, so I'm just going to quickly talk about them. There was a Night Force Chuckles figure that was released in a 2-pack with a brand new character called Freestyle. So she was just a character that had like a scarlet head and a Lady J body, but she was like a Latino. They'd given her a darker skin tone. And just the fact that she was a new character, I really wanted that freestyle figure, but she was selling for way too much right out of the gate. Like, she was selling for like $200 or something for just the one figure. And, she's not a character with any history. It's not like she's been in the comic books or anything like that. So as much as I wanted her, I wasn't going to shell out $200. And Chuckles, I already have a couple Chuckles in my collection, so I didn't really feel he was essential either. Speaking of Lady J, there was also a Night Force Lady J released that year. You could get her on a kind of vintage style card. So this was based on the Night Force Lady J that was released in 1997. Now, she wasn't really called Night Force Lady J back then. She was just Lady J version 2. She had kind of like a gray outfit instead of a green outfit. So that's what that figure was based on. But then we also got Night Force Stealer. And he came with a kind of a flak gun weapon that he could sit on. Then there was a Night Force Covert Ops ATV, which was a repaint of the Ferret vehicle. And then there was a Night Force Night Boomer, which was a repaint of the G.I. Joe Sky Striker jet. So very Night Force heavy. I actually have one more last thing I want to talk about before I wrap this up. Just for the sake of trying to make this video as complete as possible. So I talked about how this convention set gave us updated versions of G.I. Joe Night Force. However, if you look at those Night Force packs from 1988, 1989, there were additional Night Force characters that were not included in this box set. So if you're wondering, well, where's the rest of Night Force? Here are some of them. So of the original Night Force figures that we didn't already cover in this video, so there was Lieutenant Falcon, and we did get a Night Force version of Lieutenant Falcon. This guy was released in 2014 as one of the Collectors Club figure subscription services. We did get Outback here, so the Night Force version of him came out in the Cobra Island box set. Tunnel Rat here, this is him in his Night Force colors. This was included in a 2-pack in 2009 with Monkey Wrench. And Shockwave here in his Night Force colors, he was in a 2-pack with the Cobra Night Creeper in 2009 as well. Now these other two guys I have here, Sneak Peek and Crazy Legs. So they were also in the Vintage Night Force. Now Crazy Legs, he did get a Night Force figure. He was released at the 2014 G.I. Joe convention, and he was one of those parachute drop figures I kind of just mentioned. So they had that figure repainted in black, and they took a bunch of them, they threw them off the roof on parachutes, and they would drop down, and kids could run out and grab them. Now, when it comes to Sneak Peek, even though we got this figure in the modern era, both in his standard colors here, and again repainted in Tiger Force colors, the Collectors Club never re-released that figure in Night Force colors. So there is no modern era Sneak Peek in Night Force. So that's unfortunate. And then there's one additional character from Night Force, which was Lightfoot. And the thing about Lightfoot is we never got a modern version of Lightfoot at all. So there was the original version from the 80s, then the Night Force repaint, and then that's it. 2 versions, nothing since then, which is a shame because Lightfoot was another character I owned when I was a kid. I really liked him. He came with like a little robot sidekick. And anyway, so it would have been nice to get him in the modern era, but that never happened, Night Force or otherwise. So anyway, I think that's all I have to say about G.I. Joe Night Force. So that is my review of the 2013 G.I. Joe Convention box set Nocturnal Fire. So I hope you enjoyed that. I know some people have been asking me to review this for months, if not years, so sorry for the delay. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please make sure to hit the like and the subscribe button. And, please leave me comments below. That's always very much appreciated. It helps the channel. I think, as far as I understand how this algorithm works, the more, likes and comments and all that stuff I get, the more likely they are to show this video and other people's recommended videos and stuff. So, yeah, I appreciate all the traction that I get when you guys comment and like and subscribe and all that stuff. So, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you soon with another video. Ciao.